Some employee comes to him and says, why are you taking taxes out of my paycheck? Well, the reason they're taking taxes out of your paycheck is you signed a document saying that they should.
Right.
And if you don't want to have them taken out anymore, you got to file another document with them.
All right, Cliff. Well, thanks for being here again.
Well, thank you for having me.
Sure, appreciate it. We just got done with our Toastmasters Day and breakfast, and our usual breakfast junto. Ma says it's junta because it's gendered noun or something.
Yeah, right.
So,
Yeah, whichever.
right. Ben.
We know what we're talking about.
Ben Franklin said it was junto, and Ma says it's junta. So
Yeah.
Perhaps because it was all men, it was a junto.
Yeah. Right.
So
right. Yeah.
that
There you
be
go.
it. And one of the things that Jeremy brought up was about a business and the tax situation on that, and how the accountant is saying there may be taxes owed because of how much can be gifted and what it's valued and so on and so forth. And my thought on that was, well, if it's a corporation, then he can just be appointed as one of the trustees and then just takes it over.
Yeah, in this particular case, it's an LLC, which is a limited liability company. A lot of people think that LLC means limited liability corporation, but all corporations are limited liability. That's the purpose of having a corporation, is to limit the liability, to create an artificial entity that does business with the public. And in case there is injury and somebody sues, then the suit or the damage can just be limited to what the LLC owns, and it can't get into the people's personal pocket.
Right.
LLCs, you can have up to 10 members in an LLC, and they are not responsible for any more money, cannot be held responsible for any more money than what they put into it. So if you invested, say, $100,000, that's all you have at risk. You don't have anything else, and that's why people would do that. Now, there's a major difference between the word corporation when used in a state context and the word corporation whenever it's used in a federal context.
Okay.
In federal context, the word corporation means any corporation or joint stock company traded on any of the national stock exchanges, where the word corporation with a state it's a corporation created within that state, and it follows all the legislature's rules for creating that artificial entity. And LLCs were created by a couple accountants over in Wyoming in 1975, I think it was, because what they did was they petitioned the Wyoming legislature to make a short corporate form that people could file into. So what they were interested in doing was finding more ways for the state government to tax somebody. And of course, they would have to, go through accountants because nobody understands this stuff. So that creates more business for them, and that's, that was really the underlying purpose of it.
Makes sense.
So in this particular situation, the father has an LLC, and he is retiring, and he's going to transfer everything in the LLC to his son. And the accountant is one of these idiots that you shouldn't walk away from him. You should run. just get away from him, because he doesn't understand how the systems are set up. And all you would have to do is for the father to give up his control of the LLC, being the head man in the LLC, and turn it over to his son. The LLC doesn't change.
Right.
It's just who is the person made liable to respond for the LLC is the only thing that changes.
Right.
Now, one of the biggest errors I see people make who get an LLC or create an LLC is that they turn around after they've created this artificial entity and they give all of their personal energy, their thought processes, all of their capital to the LLC. For what?
Right. It's a separate.
It's a separate entity.
Right.
If you set it up so that 2% of the profit of the LLC went to the LLC, 2% of profit from the business goes to the LLC, and 98% of it comes to the members of the LLC because they're putting their energy and their thought and their contractual abilities into it.
Right.
So they have a right to get compensated for that.
Right. And what they get paid for is what they agree to.
Right.
Right. Well, that's a lot of the things. I know a lot of folks who get confused with corporations are bad. Or corporations this, corporations that. And it's just they don't understand the legalese at all of what they do, why they're there, and why they're used.
I think what the trap that most people fall into is they hear the word corporation and they may or may not have an idea in their mind about what that means. But if they do have an idea in their mind that, corporation means this, have they ever really checked it out?
Right.
Did they go to the dictionary? Did they discover the distinction between the common vernacular and code vernacular? Because common vernacular is what we use back and forth as you and I are talking here. Code vernacular is an entirely different thing. The Supreme Court says that in code vernacular, a term may mean the same as the word does in the common vernacular. It may have another meaning altogether, or it may have the exact opposite meaning of the common vernacular.
Right.
But for the code, for that purpose, the code meaning is the one that applies.
Right.
So, one of the things that happened, and I've probably talked about this before, but I'll go over it again. In 1975, Bank of America was the first bank to issue individual credit cards. And they needed to know at that time if you were credit worthy to have a card and what value they would allow you to just lend. They're lending you money on the card. And the term income for banking purposes meant everything that comes in, whether it's from your job, whether it's from alimony, whether it's from inheritance, whatever,
all of
annuities, everything that comes in
Right.
is income.
Right.
Well, that was 75 years ago. That was 50 years ago. Everybody who's under 50 years old has that meaning of income in their head.
Right.
But that's not the meaning of income whenever it comes to federal taxation, and it's
Right.
not the meaning of income when it comes to state taxation.
Right.
Those are code terms,
Right.
and
They
they have a special meaning.
They mean certain things in certain situations.
Right. That's exactly right.
Right. And there are people I've heard say, well, it's code language, so it's confusing and it's in code and this and that. No, it's because just in my lifetime, I've seen how language can change. When I was a teen, man, that's sick, went from you're disgusting pervert to, dude, you're great at skateboarding.
Right, yeah.
Like, oh, that's sick.
Yeah.
It completely changed meanings. And so, of course, when it comes to law and things that are supposed to endure, such as law and core law, common law, fundamental law, foundational law. The words have to mean things and they have to remain that way. They cannot be
Right.
fluid like languages. They have to
Right.
be
And
static.
that's the reason that we have code language, is because the code language that is described for that particular sections of the code, not all other codes or anything, but for that particular one, this word means this.
Right.
And we can't stretch it outside of that. And that's where people shoot themselves in the foot, is they say, oh well, income, that's everything that comes in.
Right.
Well, yeah, for banking purposes it is, but it isn't that for the IRS or anybody else that's in government.
Right.
It has specific meanings, and right now there's 169 different excise taxes that the federal government imposes, and it taxes it by measure of the profit or gain that you receive from that source.
Right.
So if you don't get any income from any of those 169 sources, you're not a target for the federal government.
Right. It's just like when it just goes to show how little people know when they say, these corporations don't even pay taxes. Well, if they don't have a profit.
Right. Well, and here's one of the things that a lot of people that old corporations ought to pay more taxes. The corporation can't pay out of their own pocket taxes. They have to pass it on, and if it's an excise tax, it gets passed the whole way down to the consumer.
Right. Right.
So they're going to collect the tax. You have an alcohol tax and a tobacco tax and that sort of stuff, and those manufacturers of those products have to collect that tax, but they push it on to the wholesalers. The wholesaler pushes it on to the retailer pushes it on to the customer.
Right. That's one of the things when people talk about, oh, we need a higher guaranteed wage. The biggest pushers of that are giant corporations.
Right.
Because they can take the hit, pass it on to the consumer, and then they constrict the margins for the smaller businesses who bleed them here and there through a little cuts, and then it's just less competition.
Right.
And the people who are out there saying, we're going to get back at these giant corporations by upping the wages and the unions, and we need these contracts. It doesn't hurt the corporations at all. It helps them because it squeezes the smaller guy.
Right.
All the mom and pop stores, all of those things. Right. That's what occurs there.
Well, and you can take any industry. You take a new industry that comes into the marketplace, and it starts off and it starts to climb as there's more clients and more people understand the value of having that product and that stuff. And it goes up and up and up, and then it goes over and down the other side like a bell curve. And it goes up and up and up. And one of the things you will notice if you pay attention is whenever you hit the top of that curve, there's only 3 big players involved. And once you get to 3 big players, that sucker's going to go down. Whenever, any time if you're investing in the stock market and you see that there's 3 big players, there's in finance, there's BlackRock and there's Vanguard and
State Street.
Yeah, right. There's 3 big players. There might be a 4th one, but there's 3 big players.
Right.
And they can't be competed with. You just can't do it.
Right.
But when they're not competed with it, they slop their services off. They keep on swindling the customer out of their services. And finally the customer doesn't touch them, doesn't want to deal with them. And when that happens, they're done.
Right. Right.
And the only persons that made out on the thing were the lawyers and accountants.
Yeah. That's one of the the things when I hear people talk about the corrupt system, it's not a corrupt system, it's a corrupted system, or it's a system used by corrupt people. And it may sound like I'm trying to nitpick or split hairs, but it's just like when it comes to code language. It's not done that way to be corrupt and for people to then abuse it. It's
Right.
just it gets abused by bureaucrats who aren't accountable because people don't know even what income means.
Right. Right. And whenever you're talking about a bureaucrat or to a bureaucrat, you have to use the code meanings of the language.
Right.
And they have to use the code meanings of the language too if you're going to have communication.
Right. And if they refuse to speak to you that way, then that's when you have to get legal speak involved.
Right.
Right.
Right. And one of the big powerful things that all people have is the small claims court.
Mm-hmm.
In small claims court, you can't have a lawyer. In small claims court, you're limited in Idaho to $5,000. If But one of the most important things to sue somebody, especially somebody who works in government, is to sue them for their authority.
Right.
We want to go back to that authority, and of course, if you ask them for it, some people will give it to you, and some people will go, oh my, I'm sorry, I didn't have that right.
Right.
Other people will just say, oh no, you don't know what you're talking about,
right.
and then they blow you off. Well, you have to go through a process. You have to write to them so that you have proof, and you got to send it certified mail and all of that sort of thing. And if you want it to be evidence in a court of law, you better have your signature notarized too, so that they know it's from you and it's official business.
Right.
And you're suing them as an individual who sometimes works for this agency of government. But you're suing the front desk gal or the person that told you no or
the accountant or the head
right,
of the department.
Right. Yeah, you sue the accountant, not the accountancy business.
Right. Right.
And they're what you want out of that is not their money. You want them to cease and desist. Now,
Right.
you don't want their money. You would make a claim in the court for $4,000 or $5,000, whatever the maximum is, and then you let the court decide how much it is. Because like if you just said, well, I'll only charge you $1, they're not going to show up. They'll pay you the $1, and you're no further ahead than what you were whenever you started.
Right. It has to be enough to sting, and it has to be enough. If it goes up the chain of command, then those people won't want to touch it.
Right. Right. Yeah. And one of the things that happens is, if you can imagine this, the wife is working for some company or corporation, and she's running the books and that kind of stuff, and some employee comes to him and says, why are you taking taxes out of my paycheck? Well, the reason they're taking taxes out of your paycheck is you signed a document saying that they should. And if you don't want to have them taken out anymore, you got to file another document with them.
Right.
And their only duty is to ask you whenever you say, I don't want it taken out. Okay, the next day, they ask you again, do you want it taken out? And if you say no again, then they can write to the Secretary of the Treasury and say, this person, my employee, said not to take any money out of my paycheck, and we asked them twice. So it's between you, the Secretary of the Treasury, and them. We're out of it.
Right. Yeah, when I worked at a large nationwide retail store, when I signed on as seasonal employee as a kid, there was a box to check.
Mm-hmm.
and I just checked the box and we went along our merry way.
Right.
That was just the way it was.
Right. And some big corporations know that, and other ones don't.
Right.
And where you get into problems are these mom and pop accountancy things where people took, a course over the internet or something.
For 3 months.
Yeah, for 3 days in accounting. And, but they if they spent 3 days in accounting, they spent, if they worked 24 hours, or they worked 3 days at 8 hours apiece, it would be 24 hours of study, where in a college CPA course, they only get 1 hour on taxation. So they're probably better equipped than the guy that went to college and got a CPA degree.
Yeah, it's just like with doctors and nutrition. Where like
Right, yeah.
folks who go to a doctor for nutrition advice are just some of the most ignorant people.
Right.
Because doctors also get like 3 or 4 hours, I think, on nutrition, if that, in their 4 or 6 years it takes to get their MD.
Right.
Okay.